Alright, welcome back guys. Today we have this 6-speed transmission out of a 2012 Outback, and we're going to be putting that into the Impreza. So it's a pretty basic swap. See, it's going to be a cable shift setup now, so you're going to need the shift mechanism. It also has the lockout for reverse. You'll need the shift boot off it, but this plastic ring you don't need because you'll need to reuse the one from your car so it'll fit. And of course the rear end. You can reuse your stock axle, clutch, and drive shaft. You don't have to change any of that because this is just a modified version of the 5-speed essentially. So you can see here I pulled the engine out. I find it's easier to just take the engine out to do it. That way you don't have to pull your tires off or take the suspension apart to get the axles out. You can leave the axles right in and just kind of wiggle the transmission around them. And same with the rear end. I don't bother taking the rear suspension apart. You can lower the diff down, pop the axles out, and you don't have to worry about retorquing anything. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the center console out here. I'll get that stripped down and take the shift linkage out and take all that apart. Alright, to get the top part of your shift linkage apart, you're going to need to take this whole section here out. So there's 2 screws, 10mm or Phillips in the bottom of your compartment here. Then you grab your boot and just pull up on it. Kind of pull that above the handle. There's supposed to be one more Phillips screw right here. And then you can pull that up. You can just set it behind you. So as you can see, I don't have the shift boot on, but normally right now I'd pull the shift boot downward and it'll take it off the shift knob. And then you just unthread it and it'll come right off. So you can take the shift knob out of the way, and then you grab this piece and pull that up, pull the shift boot off. It comes back, and then up and off. And then there's 2 screws in the front here. There's 2 screws in the back. Take those out, same thing, it pulls up a little bit and back. That'll take those off. And then there should also be another rubber boot underneath this piece of metal, but that didn't work with the lift kit, so that came off. Once you have those 4 bolts out, you can take this plate off, push the boot down under with the linkage, and take this bolt here out. Just want to unthread that. Pull it all the way out, and then you can pull the shift linkage back off it, and that'll be disconnected. Alright, now we're going to disconnect the drive shaft. There's 4 bolts in the back of it. You need a 12mm wrench. You can turn the drive shaft to get them on the bottom as you need. So you take those 4 bolts out. Usually you'll have to tap this yoke around a little bit to get it to break free. Then you can take that down, move forward to the steady bearing. Normally these blocks won't be here, and this piece of the steady bearing will be right against the body. That's just paired to the lift kit. And it's just 2 14mm bolts. Pull the drive shaft out. Then it just slides straight back. Then when you come here, there's 2 bolts in your shift bushing. This is also a little different because of the lift. Normally it's just the 2 bolts. You can pull the shifter down. And then the bottom nut comes off. You can slide the arm. And then it's just this one piece of linkage that'll be in the way when you take it out. You don't have to disconnect that, but I find it's easier to take out of the tunnel without it. And there are also 4 bolts for the transmission mount, so we'll take those out and then we can pop the axles and remove the transmission. So on the front here for the axles, just take a pry bar, put it beneath that cup, and just snap on it a few times until the axle pops out. Once you pop the axle out, you want to make sure it's out far enough that it's kind of moving around a little bit. And you can lift up the transmission and pull the axle right out, and then just set it underneath. Pull it back to the opposite side and do the same thing on the other side, and then your axles will both be down and out of the way. There, now that everything's unhooked, you grab the transmission, just wiggle it a little bit, it'll pull out. Then you can just kind of work it across the subframe. You want to make sure this linkage in the back doesn't get fetched up. Alright, now I'll move back to the rear differential. There's two nuts on these studs here you got to take out. Just be careful, sometimes the studs will spin out with the nut and the rear of the diff will want to fall. So make sure you put a jack or something under it to support it. And then we'll come up here, and on this part of the frame there's two bolts coming straight down through this bracket on the diff. You want to break those free and then pull these bolts here out just to make it a little easier to try to fight that out. Then once that's out, lower it down. You want to lower the diff down so the weight's not quite hanging on the axles. And you can just push it to one side, slide it back a bit, and then you can pull the axle out, pull it to the other side, and your other axle will come out. And that's all you got to do to get the rear end out. Now I'll take it over to the bench and change the bracket. So you can see with the two differentials, the cases are the same. The only difference is the gear ratio. This is a 3.9 and this is a 444. So it's a lot lower geared, much better for the application. So you just want to tip your diff up. Take the two nuts off of this bracket. Pull that off. It only goes one way, so you don't have to worry about getting it spun around. Put that in the new diff. Put that in there. Grab the nuts, put them back on that. Tighten them up by hand. It's easier to tighten them up when they're in the car and the diff is in the frame. And you'll see here, it's a 3/8 airline fitting I just put into the rear diff. I put that in so I could put an airline on it and extend it up through the trunk and vent it out by the gas cap instead of having it right at the diff and get full of water and mud. So ready to put this back in the car. So the rear diff goes in the same way it came out. Just I'm going to put the back end in first. Slide it into your studs. And then just jacking it up and sliding it in. Put your two bolts in. You can lower your jack and tighten everything up, and the rear diff is done. Here we have the two transmissions side by side, the 5-speed and 6-speed. You're going to want to reuse this pilot bearing and the clutch fork, so you just pull that straight off, down out of the boot. These have a tendency to break around this pivot, so you always want to clean this and your little pivot ball, put a little bit of grease in there. I always put just a little film around this where it slides on the transmission case, just so it doesn't get stuck or seized up. Push that in and up a little bit, and that'll sit right in. And then this bracket on the top, I've already switched over. Let's take this top bolt out, take the nut off this second bolt, and then you can see it just slides back on. And the only other issue we're going to address when the time comes is this bracket here for the air intake. Normally sits right there, but there's nothing for it to bolt to on this transmission. So I think I'm going to try and make something where it bolts onto these instead, because those won't be used in this application. So we got the transmission set back in. So you want it right around the middle of this gap here for the power steering rack. Now we can grab the transmission, pick it up and away. Make sure there's no dirt or anything on your axles. And slide them right in. Now we'll come back underneath and put these 4 bolts back in. You want to leave those loose for now. Just put them in a couple threads so you can still jack the front of the transmission up later. So to put the shifter in, this is the old plate for the 5-speed shift linkage, and this is the new cable linkage for the 6-speed. You can see it still has this lip here to mount for the center console, but on the bottom there's these 4 studs sticking down through. There's no holes for it because this doesn't originally have that, but these 4 mounting holes are all the same. So this will bolt on. You just have to drill or cut 4 holes for these to go through, and then you can mount the box on the bottom that actually holds the cables together. Alright, so right here you can see these 2 holes, and these 2 holes are the original mounting holes. And then I drilled these 2 holes, and this is where the other 2 studs go. My drill died, so I just cut it out with the recip saw. So once you have those cut out, your studs here will just go right into those holes. And then you use the same bolts here that came out of the other metal plate. So once you tighten up those 4 bolts, you can put your center console back together. And then for the shift boot, this plastic trim piece that clips in around the shift boot, you'll need to take that off and put it on the new shift boot. So you just take the little tabs on the bottom, you pull them towards the top, and it just drops down like that. So you just take the old one off, clip the new one in. It won't fit quite 100% on the bottom, but once you clip it down in, it looks good. So once you get that clipped in all the way around on the bottom, you can put your 6-speed shift knob on. This is the stock shift knob off a 2020 WRX. Then kind of looks original. Alright, now we have our 4 studs sticking out the bottom to mount our little shift box here. Take up the slack in the cable however you need it. It's 4 10mm nuts. To install the shift linkage, you can see this black piece here is just a through hole. So it'll go on the stud on the side part of the shifter. That clips on. And then this other piece, you can see there's a metal clip on it. You want to make sure that's all the way to the rear under the plastic clip in the back once it's on. And that you just simply push it up on and then slide that front clip back. Then once you get that on, you'll grab the bottom plate here and this plate goes with the rubber gasket up. Once you put your 4 nuts on this plate, tighten those up. That's it for the shifter, and we can put the drive shaft back in. Alright, so the drive shaft just goes in reverse order of how it came out. I'll try and find the proper master spline on it. So only go in one direction, one rotation. So it's in there. And you just put our 2 bolts in here, bolt it back to the drive shaft. Alright, the transmission's in, diff's in, all the drivetrain's hooked up. Now once I get the work done I need to do on the engine, I'll put that back in and see what we can do with the exhaust mounts and the intake mount. Alright, now we'll come down and start to make our new exhaust hanger. I have the old 5-speed one here. I accidentally threw out the 6-speed one, so that'll make it a little trickier. But on the 6-speed, the hanger bolts onto the rear of the transmission, up somewhere like that. But as you can see, it doesn't really fit. So I cut the end off it, where the bolt goes through, as you can see right there. So I'll have to take this and cut it right about here as well. And then I'll bolt that onto the transmission and weld something in between the two to brace them together. So I'll go cut this top off as well, then I can bolt that on and see what I'll need for a centerpiece. Alright, so I cut the two mounting spots out of the exhaust hanger. You can see end is right here, and the other end is right here. What I'll do is I'll take this center that was cut out of it. You'll see, looks like it would fit pretty well right here. So all I'm going to do is, and I'll cut the angle the opposite way, so it kind of mates down better on that. And then it should line up around the top, so I can weld that up as well. And it should hold on pretty well. So I'll go trim this angle and see if I can get it to fit a little better. Alright, after I trimmed it 3 or 4 times, I finally got this piece fitting pretty well. Something like that. And then I'll cut this corner off the top once it's welded. I'll put that in the corner here as a little gusset, just to give it a little more strength. So now I'll unbolt all the pieces, clean them up, get them ready to be welded, and then I'll put them back in place and tack them so they hold shape. Alright, as you can see, I got the little filler piece held in with a couple welding magnets. So I'll weld across here, and then up and down on this line here. Then I'll take it out and finish welding it, and probably put a bracket from here up as well, just so it's nice and strong and we don't have to worry about anything breaking. Alright, so as you can see, the mount is all welded up. It's pretty solid. You can also tell I'm clearly not a welder or a fabricator. But I'll put it back under the car, make sure it didn't warp too much or anything when I was welding it. And then I'll cut this angle here off. I'll put that down here as a bit of a gusset to add some strength. So this is what the final product looks like installed in the car. Fits just perfect. And right here we have the last piece of the puzzle. It's the mount for the airbox. I cut the center section out of the main tube, welded it together. I just had to bend this bottom section a little bit, and then I mounted it on the slave cylinder bolt. I don't have any more metal, but later on I'll put a little brace across here just to take a little bit of the flexibility out. You can see the top mount's broken on this box, so I'll have to plastic weld that together anyway. That was the last piece of the puzzle. Now the 6 speed's in and ready to go. Hopefully this helped. Thanks for watching.